Now, I mentioned this yesterday, that a open letter signed by nearly 2,000 public servants basically condemning Israel and Australia's involvement with Israel, for lack of a better way of putting it, has been called out by Senator Dave Sharma, who's called for consequences for those public servants who signed the open letter. Basically, they want to end military exports from Australia to Israel. Dave Sharma joins us on the line. G'day, Dave.
Good morning, Stephen.
Look, I'm in two minds about this, because our public servants aren't particularly productive at the best of times, and if the consequences are too harsh, they're going to be even less productive. What do you want to see happen here?
Well, I think the message needs to be sent and reinforced that the public service is there to be apolitical, independent, and to serve the policy of the government of the day. And it doesn't really matter what the policy area is. If you have public servants openly signing a letter condemning the government's policy and demanding that it be overturned, you have to question in your mind, and the public does, can these public servants do the job they're employed to do, which is to implement the policy of the day? And I think the answer is no. If they can sign a letter like this, with their own name, with their own agency and department, basically demanding the government's policy be overturned, then you'd have to say, well, can we really trust them to do their job fairly? But
given that the government itself has been, well, schizophrenic at best on its position on Israel, aren't they following the government's lead here?
Well, look, I do agree with your criticism of the government's policy, that it's been all over the place on Israel here. But then, I mean, I think this is really a test for the government. Do they support their policy or not? Or have they got a number of different policies depending on who the audience is? But I think if you conducted a thought experiment and said, well, what if a whole lot of public servants demanded that the government stop its transition to clean energy or abolish all wind farms or not announce approvals anymore for any of this, you'd see the government take action quite quickly and say, if that's not acceptable, we're employed by you. Now, as I said, this is really about the impartiality and independence of the public service and their ability to do their job. And that's why the issue, I think, is so important.
You've written to the various departments via questions on notice asking what their response to this has been. What are they telling you? What are the department heads saying?
Look, to be honest, it's all over the place, which I think is a problem as well, because it's the Australian Public Service Commission that's ultimately responsible for implementing this policy. Some departments are investigating and said and that there will be consequences or disciplinary action taken. Some departments have said they're not investigating at all. A couple we're yet to hear from, Defence and Foreign Affairs and Trade in particular. But I think the variation in this is also troubling, because you need to have one standard across the federal public service, and ultimately it's the Australian Public Service Commission and the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet that are responsible for ensuring that that standard is uniform and that it's met. Yeah,
and the question needs to be asked is, what should they have been doing while they were off signing this letter, rather than actually focused on their jobs too, which is a broader problem. Dave, look, as I say, I agree with you that consequences need to be meted out here, but I'm a bit concerned about 2,000 public servants on the dole line, so to speak, because it's going to cost us money without getting anything for it.
Look, I mean, it ultimately, I'm not saying there should be a particular sanction. I'm not necessarily saying people should lose their jobs. I respect that's a decision for the secretaries. But you can't just sort of allow people to get away with this without any sort of counselling or meeting or some sort of performance adjustment, because otherwise the message that's being sent is, oh, you're free to do whatever you'd like. And, the next thing is public servants will down their tools if they're being asked to do something that they don't particularly like or don't particularly agree with. And we cannot have a public service working for the government that behaves in that sort of a way.
Yeah, I think it's a fair call. Dave, good to talk to you this morning.
Thanks so much, Stephen.
Dave Sharma, Liberal Senator. I think he makes a few good points there. 6255 1206.